He toasted the land she built like it was his. Lance Dunbridge raised his glass to applause, never noticing that his mother had already erased his name from the deed. Janine Blackwell, 72, didn't shout or storm out. She served the salad, folded napkins, and filed every document that would leave him speechless. By the time he called her the extra chair, she'd already taken the table. And when he tried to claim her legacy, the bylaws would speak louder than blood. Before we begin, may I ask, where in this big, beautiful world are you listening from? It's always a quiet honor to know who's sharing this space. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The backyard shimmered in golden hour light, the kind that makes even resentment look soft. A long farmhouse table stretched across the stone patio, dressed in linen and eucalyptus runners. Mason jars with floating candles bobbed slightly in the October breeze. Everything about the setup screamed curated hospitality. Rustic elegance, influencer approved, and just uncomfortable enough to feel expensive. Lance Dunbridge stood at the head of the table, palms extended like a man who couldn't believe his own good fortune, or wanted everyone else to. To closing the Brighton Harbor deal, he declared, raising a glass of Oregon Pinot, waterfront views, tax breaks, and 32 acres of buildable dreams. Couldn't have done it without my crew. Applause rose around the table, some genuine, some polite. Janine was not seated at the table. She was serving. She moved from guest to guest with a quiet rhythm, the side salad here, another helping of rosemary rolls there. Her long gray hair was braided down her back, tied with a discreet navy ribbon. When she got to Callie, she leaned in gently and adjusted the younger woman's napkin without a word. Folding it across her lap like a peace offering, Callie caught her eye. "You okay?" Janine smiled, a soft line crossing her face. "Oh yes, I'm just watching the paint dry on borrowed walls." Callie opened her mouth to ask what that meant, but Lance's voice boomed again. "She's the extra chair at every table," he joked to a guest near him, a man in a navy blazer who looked like he'd never held his own steering wheel. "Always there, never needed." Laughter rippled, not hearty, just enough to sting. Janine didn't flinch. She turned toward the kitchen without a word, her linen apron fluttering slightly behind her. The wind was picking up, and with it came the faintest hint of ocean salt from the coast, miles away. Callie's face tightened. She looked around. No one else seemed to have heard the jab, or they'd filed it into the quirky Lance folder that people used to excuse his cruelties. Her mother, Marlene, was fussing with wine pairings. Her uncle Rick was already 2 bourbons deep, chuckling at nothing. Callie leaned to her grandmother's empty chair, picked up the glass of sparkling water Janine had poured earlier, and took a sip. Inside, Janine reached the counter and placed the empty salad bowl down carefully, as if it might scream if it made too much noise. Her hands paused on the edge. She stared at her reflection in the window pane. For a moment, the glass showed her younger, the woman who used to own this home before Lance put her in the guest cottage for comfort. A woman who signed the deed over under pressure when the market dipped. A woman who thought family came before paperwork. Behind her, Callie entered quietly. "He always does that," she said, not looking at Janine directly. "Takes a jab and calls it charm." "It's not a jab," Janine said softly. "It's a pull." "A pull?" "From the chair." Janine turned, eyes sharp now. "He's always testing if it'll fall when I sit down, always trying to prove I don't belong." Callie's jaw clenched. "Why do you still come to these things?" Janine shrugged. "I like to watch." The word hung between them, strange and heavy. Then a guest called out, "Dessert's out yet?" Callie stepped toward her grandmother. "You don't have to keep letting him." "I don't let him," Janine said, voice low and clear. "I record him." Callie blinked. "Every time he thinks he's clever. Every time he thinks no one notices," Janine said, picking up the pie knife. "People think silence is surrender. It's not. It's surveillance." Callie stared at her. The woman who always seemed like background furniture had edges now, and a plan. Outside, Lance clinked a fork against his wine glass. "Come on, Mom. We need your toast. Can't close the deal without the original Dunbridge blessing." Callie stepped between Janine and the door. "You don't have to." But Janine was already moving, pie knife in one hand, dish towel in the other, calm as a chess piece about to cross the board. "I know. she stepped out into the golden light again. Toward the table, toward the man who'd tried to pull her seat, and toward something neither of them had expected. Her voice. The downtown office smelled like eucalyptus and printer toner. High glass windows overlooked the river and cut a sharp diagonal of light across the black stone conference table. Janine sat at its head, her spine straight, a navy blue folder resting in front of her like a sealed secret. Rachel Lynn swept in 5 minutes late. Pinstripe suit, no makeup, the kind of presence that didn't require it. She gave a quick nod. Traffic was a war zone, but I brought backup. She raised a caramel latte in one hand and set her laptop bag down with the other. Janine didn't smile. We're not here for comfort. Rachel sat across from her and opened the laptop. Good, I brought consequences. Janine opened the folder. Inside, crisp documents. Legal ones, originals, not copies. She slid them across the table one by one like tarot cards, each revealing a truth no one had seen coming. Majority ownership, Janine said, tapping the deed. The foundation, too. When Richard died, the attorneys did what I asked. Lance thought the board voted him in. They didn't. I let him believe it. Until now. Rachel whistled softly, eyes scanning the percentages, the clauses. He's been fundraising under your name for 7 years, Janine nodded once. And building on land tied to a foundation he doesn't actually control. Rachel blinked once, then leaned back. It's a miracle he hasn't tanked you into court already. Oh, he will, but he'll have to fight uphill. I paved the ground while he was busy pretending he owned it. Rachel closed the folder slowly. Okay. Here's what we can do. First, revise the trust. We strip every advisory right. He doesn't get to recommend a damn thing. Not to the board, not to you, and definitely not to Callie. At the mention of her granddaughter's name, Janine's face softened. But only slightly. Good, let her inherit clean. Rachel was already typing. We can make it airtight. Time the trigger clauses to activate at specific intervals. Include trackable notifications. He'll know he's been locked out, and he'll know it's permanent. Janine didn't look at the screen. Her gaze was fixed on a wall-mounted abstract painting. Thick streaks of charcoal and ivory, fighting each other in silence. I want the house title protected. Beyond reach. I don't care how he tries to squeeze. Divorce, probate, shell company, I want it locked. Rachel nodded. We'll bury it in a private trust and hold it under legacy exemption. Paper trail goes cold after 2 hops. He won't even find the mailbox. Janine inhaled, slow and deliberate. She felt every one of her 72 years in that moment, but not as weight. As armor. Rachel's phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it, paused, then tilted it slightly toward Janine. The screen showed a preview text from Mara. Dad would want us to do everything together. Don't make this uglier than it has to be. Janine didn't touch the phone. Her voice was steel. Together is for people who came to the table honest. Mara let Lance sign over my silence like a wedding gift. She's scared, Rachel offered. He's got their loyalty boxed in shame. Janine reached for the pen. That's not my burden anymore. They worked for nearly 2 hours. Clause by clause. Each line of legal text carved a path away from dependency, from legacy built on manipulation. Rachel annotated and time-stamped everything. Janine initialed like someone stitching up an old wound. Outside, the sun dropped behind the skyline, and the windows turned into mirrors. Janine saw herself reflected again, but this time, she wasn't just watching. She was writing the ending. As Rachel gathered the final pages into a new binder, she paused. There's one more option, she said carefully. We can place a sunset clause on the family foundation. When you pass, it dissolves. Clean break. No more Dunbridge name attached. Janine didn't speak for a long time. Then, finally, no. Rachel blinked. I want it renamed, Janine said quietly. The Callahan Trust, after my mother. Rachel smiled slowly. Okay. That's easy. Janine stood, sliding the binder into her handbag like a weapon concealed. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Mara, this one longer, begging for unity, quoting Bible verses, reminding her they were still blood. Janine didn't open it. She just turned to Rachel and said, I'm done waiting for people to understand paper they never bothered to read. And as she stepped into the elevator, The last rays of daylight caught the edge of her gold wedding band, the one she hadn't taken off even after Richard died. She twisted it once, then let it slide off her finger. By the time the doors closed, it was in her coat pocket. The drive clicked into place with a soft chime, an almost polite sound, considering what it held. Rachel tapped the keys fast, scanning folder names that told a very different story than the one Lance had been selling for years. These aren't just old contracts, she muttered. They're time-stamped filings, vendor authorizations, site approvals with your signature line, not his. Janine sat still beside her, arms crossed, unreadable. Richard insisted I keep hard copies of everything. He never trusted cloud storage. Smart man, Rachel said, dragging one file into a new folder labeled Litigation Prep. You know what this means, right? I know exactly what it means, Janine replied. He's been building sandcastles on my land, under my name, and calling it a legacy. A knock on the open door. Callie stepped in, holding her phone like it had just confessed a sin. I did a search, she said. Dad's press kits, the recent grant applications, his LinkedIn bio. He's calling himself founder and executive director of the Callahan Initiative. She turned the screen. The branding was slick. Navy serif font over a white and gold crest. It looked legitimate. It wasn't. Janine gave a faint, bitter laugh. He likes to use what he forgets he borrowed. Callie shook her head. He's not borrowing. He's stealing with polish. Rachel stood, stretching her neck. I'll loop in Foundation Counsel. We'll get a cease and desist drafted and sent to every partner, sponsor, and media outlet he's used that title with. If he even thinks about contesting, he'll trigger discovery. That's when the real fun starts. Janine raised an eyebrow. And the board? I'll schedule a vote to remove him as public liaison. The bylaws give us precedent. Rachel paused, studying Janine's face. You sure you want it this public? Public is the only language he speaks, Janine said, calm but razor sharp. I've let him speak it alone long enough. Callie was already scrolling, saving screenshots, date-stamping every claim, post, and digital footprint she could find. If we get it early enough, I can capture edits before he tries to scrub them. Rachel leaned down again and began typing. The soft clicks filled the room like tiny firecrackers, precise, surgical. Then another knock. Firmer this time. Janine rose and crossed to the door, finding Lloyd Shepherd on the porch. Old denim jacket, clipboard under one arm, the smell of truck oil trailing in behind him. Evening, he said, taking off his ball cap. Didn't mean to interrupt. You didn't, Janine replied. Come in. He stepped inside slowly, giving a respectful nod to Rachel and Callie before turning his attention back to Janine. I was down at the City Hall meeting Tuesday, he said. Zoning proposals for the Bluff side. Your name came up. Janine narrowed her eyes. He pitched a multi-use commercial district, called it family-endorsed land, even dropped the phrase maternal blessing, whatever that means. Callie made a noise halfway between disbelief and fury. He used you to leverage a development pitch, Lloyd nodded, said he'd already secured quiet support, claimed he was negotiating easement rights with the founding estate holder. I am the founding estate holder, Janine said. Her voice didn't rise, but it darkened. A shift in temperature. Rachel stood and walked to the kitchen counter, muttering, Okay. We're adding zoning misrepresentation to the file. Callie turned to Janine. He's setting the fuse on something bigger. We're not just talking reputation anymore. We're talking criminal exposure. Janine walked back to the dining table slowly and sat down. The old wood creaked beneath her, the only thing that ever groaned in her presence. She pulled the binder from her bag and laid it next to the USB drive. Two simple objects. Together, they weighed a ton. Then it's time we strike first, she said. Callie looked up. With what? Janine didn't answer, not right away. Instead, she opened the binder to the first page, the new foundation bylaws, and drew a red line under a clause that hadn't existed before today. In the event of verified misuse, all promotional privileges are immediately suspended. Retroactively, she tapped the page. We'll start with his name, and then we'll erase his shadow. The doorbell rang again, sharp, impatient. Callie's breath caught. Rachel glanced toward the window. Janine didn't move. The man at the door wore a Sitti badge on a navy windbreaker and carried a briefcase that looked older than he was. "Mrs. Dunbridge?" he asked, though he already knew. Janine gave a measured nod. "That's me. I'm Donald Polk, City Zoning Liaison. Sorry to drop by unannounced, but you've been named as a co-signer on an exemption request. They need your confirmation for Thursday's hearing." Janine didn't flinch. "What exemption?" Polk opened his case, pulling out a manila folder with an embossed seal. He turned the packet around. There it was. Her name, printed clean and bold at the bottom of page 2, next to Lance's. Callie stepped behind her grandmother, reading over her shoulder. "You never signed this." "I did not," Janine said flatly. Polk scratched his chin. "That's concerning. The committee flagged it because your legacy property's involved. The Bluff lot. The application claims the zoning change has your direct endorsement." Rachel appeared in the hallway, arms crossed. "You realize that's document fraud, right?" Polk held up his hands. "I'm not here to pick sides. Just doing my job. But council's expecting her to appear. If she doesn't, it'll likely push through uncontested." Janine took the folder. "Then I'll be there." Polk nodded once and backed away. Thursday, 9 a.m., City Hall, room 3B. As soon as the door clicked shut, Rachel exploded. "This is bigger than misuse. This is forged consent. That's a felony." Callie picked up the form, scanning the legal fine print. He signed as her proxy, claiming implied endorsement, based on a verbal legacy agreement. That's not even a real thing. "It is if no one challenges it," Rachel said bitterly. "We can file a freeze with the planning board. They'll put the exemption on hold while we investigate." "No," Janine said. Both women turned to her. "I'll be there. Let him squirm in real time." Rachel raised an eyebrow. "You're sure? These meetings are public record. The press attends, developers, real estate syndicates. If you show up, it won't stay quiet." Janine gave a tired smile. "Good." She walked into the kitchen, poured herself a glass of water, and stood by the window as if drawing strength from the autumn sun. Her voice didn't rise, but it settled like iron. "For years he's used my name like wallpaper, just background texture to decorate his lies. This time, I'm walking into the room he tried to decorate with me." The room fell silent, until the vibration of Callie's phone broke the spell. She frowned at the screen. "It's Mara," Rachel groaned. "Let me guess. Peacekeeping mission." Callie put her phone on speaker. "Hey, you're on with me, Grandma, and Rachel." Mara's voice was already thick with forced calm. "I heard about the zoning thing. Can we not turn this into a circus? Please? Maybe we can handle it quietly, as a family." Janine didn't even glance at the phone. "Did you know he used my name?" Mara hesitated. "He said you had talked about supporting mixed-use projects on the bluff. He said he had your blessing." "I didn't." More silence. "Look, Dad's not perfect," Mara said. "But dragging this through public channels, it'll humiliate him. It'll divide us." Callie stepped forward, eyes blazing. "He made it public the second he used her name on a legal document." "He's still our father," Mara snapped. "There's a better way to resolve this." Janine stepped forward and spoke directly to the phone, voice cutting clean. "Your father is a grown man who signed my name without consent. This isn't a disagreement, it's a betrayal." "I'm begging you," Mara whispered. "Don't go to that hearing." Janine leaned forward and ended the call without another word. Rachel exhaled. "Well, that'll go over well at Thanksgiving." Janine turned to both women, her voice suddenly low and steady. "I'm not going to that hearing to fight him." Callie frowned. "Then why?" "I'm going to unmake him." The room fell still. From outside, the wind kicked up, scattering leaves across the porch, as if nature itself had just overheard something irreversible. City Hall smelled like lemon polish and cold ambition. The marble floors gleamed beneath Janine's low heels as she made her way down the corridor. Steady, deliberate, unstoppable. Room 3B waited ahead, its glass door frosted with the city seal. Behind it, she could already hear the rustle of paperwork and the low buzz of men who thought they still controlled the narrative. Rachel walked just behind her, laptop bag slung over one shoulder, her expression set to courtroom neutral. Callie followed, clutching a small folder of printouts, screenshots, timestamps, digital trails. The three women moved like a formation, past, present, and future in quiet coordination. When Janine entered, the noise dimmed by instinct. Lance was already there. Navy suit, tan face, that same salesman's grin stretched just a shade too wide. His lawyer, a young man in a charcoal suit, leaned toward him, whispering something urgent. Lance barely heard it. His eyes locked on Janine as if she'd walked in carrying a weapon. Maybe she had. Mr. Polk stood at the front of the room, gavel in hand. Good morning, everyone. This hearing concerns the zoning exemption request for the Bluffside Commercial District. Applicants of record, Mr. Lance Dunbridge, and co-signer Mrs. Janine Blackwell. He glanced up at her with quiet apology. Thank you for appearing, ma'am. Janine inclined her head. I prefer to speak for myself. Lance chuckled softly, breaking the tension. Of course she does. Mom's always had a flair for the dramatic. Rachel whispered under her breath. He should have stayed home, Mr. Polk continued, tone firm. Mrs. Blackwell, we've received claims of forged consent on this application. Do you confirm or deny your participation in the exemption request? Janine rested both hands on the table, fingers aligned perfectly with the edge. I deny any participation. I did not authorize this application. I did not sign these papers. And I did not grant anyone permission to use my name or estate in this filing. Her words landed with surgical precision. Slow, steady, clean. No tremor. No tears. Rachel reached into her case and placed a bound packet on the table, the edges crisp and notarized. These are verified property records and foundation bylaws. They establish Mrs. Blackwell as the sole owner of the Bluffside Tract and principal authority of the Callahan Trust, previously the Dunbridge Family Foundation. You'll note a clause dated and recorded last week, removing Mr. Dunbridge from all advisory roles. The room stilled. Mr. Polk flipped through the pages, eyes narrowing. These are signed and sealed by the county clerk. Rachel nodded. Filed under affidavit. Certified copies are in your records office. Lance's lawyer leaned forward, voice tight. We object to the timing of these revisions. They were made after the application was submitted. Rachel smiled thinly. Correct. Because they were made after we discovered the application was fraudulent. Lance's smile faltered. Rachel, let's not, Janine interrupted, voice level. Let's. She turned toward the council table. My late husband, Richard Blackwell, and I established the foundation to preserve community land. Every contract, every project, every cent ran through me after his passing. Lance Dunbridge has never held ownership. Not legally, not morally. A low murmur ran through the audience. Reporters scribbled faster. Janine continued. For 7 years, he has used my name to secure bids, sponsorships, and personal partnerships. He has misrepresented my role in at least 6 public filings and 3 grant applications. I have brought documentation of each. Callie slid a folder forward. Her digital evidence printed in sharp color. Screenshots of websites, proposal headers, social media posts, linking Lance's name to the Callahan Initiative. Each one included Janine's face or biography as founding matriarch. Rachel added quietly, each instance corresponds with grant submissions totaling $1.2 million in property valuation adjustments. Lance's lawyer shifted in his seat. Mr. Polk, my client has operated in good faith under a long-standing family agreement. Family agreement? Janine's voice sliced through his sentence. You mean habit. He's mistaken inheritance for permission. Lance opened his mouth to speak, but the words didn't form. His jaw flexed. His eyes darted toward the press bench, then to his sister in the second row, Mara, pale, clutching her purse, as though it might shield her from the truth unraveling around them. Rachel leaned toward Mr. Polk. We're requesting immediate suspension of the application on the grounds of fraudulent representation. Mr. Polk looked up. Mrs. Blackwell, would you like to request full withdrawal of this application? Janine met his gaze. No. Lance looked up sharply. Mr. Polk blinked. No? I don't want it withdrawn, Janine said, calm as a stone in still water. I'd like to press charges for fraud. The silence was total. Even the reporters stopped typing. Lance's lawyer stammered. That's highly irregular, not illegal, Rachel said coolly, and well within her right. Mr. Polk swallowed hard, the gravity settling over the room. We'll record that for the record. Lance stood abruptly, chair scraping. Mom, don't do this. You don't understand. Janine turned her head, eyes steady. I understand perfectly. He hesitated, voice cracking. You're going to destroy everything. She folded her hands. Then maybe it shouldn't have been built on a lie. The words hit harder than a shout ever could. Lance's lawyer leaned in, whispering frantically, but Lance didn't hear him. He stared at his mother, breathing hard, color draining from his face. The grin was gone now, replaced by something raw and small. Mr. Polk, Rachel said, breaking the silence. We'll submit supplementary evidence by end of day. Polk nodded slowly, still dazed. Understood. As the gavel struck wood, signaling adjournment, the sound echoed like a verdict. Janine stood, gathering her papers, calm as if she'd just finished morning tea. Behind her, the audience began to murmur, half awe, half disbelief. Reporters whispered her name. Callie stepped beside her. Grandma, she said softly, you didn't even blink. Janine looked toward the glass doors, sunlight cutting through them in long white bars. I didn't need to. She started walking. And just before the doors closed behind her, a voice from the back called her name, Mara. Her face was wet with tears. What did you just do? Janine didn't stop walking. The knock came just after dusk. Janine didn't flinch. She'd been expecting it. The porch light flickered as Lance stepped into its glow, one hand shoved deep into the pocket of his jacket, the other holding nothing. No apology, no offering. Just that same easy posture that had once charmed senators and school board trustees alike. His tie was gone, shirt collar loosened, hair mussed in a way that would have played better 20 years ago. Now it just looked like desperation trying on an old coat. Can we talk? He asked. Janine didn't answer. She turned and walked back into the house, leaving the door open behind her. He followed, letting it close quietly behind him. The living room was dim, lit only by a floor lamp in the corner. Shadows stretched long across the wooden floors. Janine stood by the fireplace, a folder in her hand. No tea waiting, no small talk. I think this is a misunderstanding, Lance began, his voice low and coaxing. We're family, Mom. This got messy, sure, but… She handed him the folder. He hesitated before taking it, like it might bite. Inside, termination letters, formal revocations, signed affidavits. Every last paper that tied his name to hers, or to Richard's, had been cut loose. Foundations, trusts, power of attorney, even the memorial lecture series he'd used to woo donors, gone. Erased like chalk in rain. She watched him read, her face unreadable. You didn't have to go this far, he said, trying to keep his voice even. Some of these, we built together. No, she said, quiet but firm. I built. You loitered. Lance looked up, stung. That's not fair. Janine's head tilted slightly. You called me a chair. Remember that? He faltered. What are you… You told Mara I was a chair, a figurehead. Something to prop up the image. The folder dropped slightly in his hands. Janine's voice cut deeper now, not louder, just honed. Turns out I was the floor, and you walked all over me. Lance opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. The slick veneer had cracked. In its place, a man unsure whether to beg or bluff. I never meant to hurt you, he said finally. Things got ahead of me. The foundation, the contracts. They moved faster than I could manage. I thought you understood. You thought I wasn't looking, she corrected. He took a step closer. I can fix this. We can fix this. Let me help. She stepped back. You've helped enough. The rejection was calm, but final. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. It wasn't rage that undid him. It was the stillness, the certainty. From the hallway, soft footfalls echoed against tile. Callie stood just out of sight, visible only in profile. Her arms crossed, an expression unreadable. She didn't speak, didn't need to. Her presence was witness enough. Lance saw her, and something shifted behind his eyes. She's watching, he said. A trace of old performance slipping in. Do you really want her to grow up believing this is how we treat family? Janine's eyes didn't leave his. I want her to know that legacy isn't license. He turned toward the hallway. Callie, come on, this isn't who I am. Callie tilted her head just slightly. Her silence said more than any rebuke. Lance looked back at Janine, eyes wild now. You're destroying everything Dad built. No, she said. I'm saving what he actually built, by scraping off what you've been painting over it. His hands clenched around the folder. You're not giving me a way back. There isn't one. He stood there, breathing heavy, paper rattling in his grip. Then, a sound from the kitchen. The back door opening. Janine's eyes narrowed. Did you come alone? Lance's expression flickered. Not surprise. Guilt. And from the hallway, Callie's voice came, low and sharp. Grandma, someone's outside. Janine moved past Lance without another word, already reaching for the drawer where she kept the security remote. Outside, headlights flared to life, then cut. Someone was watching, and they didn't want to be seen. By morning, the gates were locked, figuratively and literally. Lance's login credentials to the Callahan Foundation servers returned nothing but a cold red access denied. His keycard to the office deactivated. When he tried to call the finance director, the call went straight to voicemail, and then nothing at all. No returned messages. No explanations, only silence and locks and legal brick walls. He sat in his Audi outside the downtown branch office, refreshing his email. 14 unread headlines pinged in as notifications. From charity to controversy, Foundation faces fraud allegations. City Hall shocker. Is Dunbridge the new Madoff? Philanthropic fraud? Investigation underway into Callahan Trust misuse. He threw the phone into the passenger seat, gripping the steering wheel like it might stop the spinning. Inside the building, Janine's injunction had triggered a full audit. All grants currently in Lance's name were placed on hold. Partner organizations called one after another, confused, concerned, distancing themselves. At noon, Mara finally called. What the hell did you do? She hissed before he could speak. The Gazette just ran a full piece. My husband's name is on 2 of those committees, Lance. Do you even care what you've done to us? Lance stared ahead, jaw flexing. I didn't do anything. This is Mom going nuclear. She gave them receipts, Mara snapped. She gave them contracts, filings, your stupid LinkedIn screenshots. You gave speeches with her name on the backdrop, Lance. I thought we were rebranding, he muttered. She's not a color scheme, Mara's voice cracked. You've ruined everything. His voice dropped, bitter. No, she ruined everything. No, you did, she fired back. And now she's finally cleaning up the mess. You think just because you smile for the cameras, you get to rewrite the family history. She hung up. He didn't call back. Across town, Janine sat in the sunlit corner of Lloyd's office, sipping lukewarm coffee from a porcelain cup that looked older than most of the interns. Her hands were steady, her gaze even. Lloyd adjusted his glasses, scanning the latest press statement. We've framed it as stewardship, protecting legacy and public trust. Avoided phrases like embezzlement or fraud for now. Just enough smoke to justify the audit without setting fire. Janine nodded. He'll set his own fire soon enough. Lloyd looked over the rim of his glasses. You sure you don't want to lead with the Foundation's letter of separation? We could leak it quietly. Anonymous sources. Not yet, she said. Let the story breathe. Let him sweat. There was something chilling in her calm. Not vindictive, just measured. Like a judge issuing a sentence already written in the law. Rachel arrived minutes later, iPad in hand, her expression sharp. I just came from the attorney's suite. We can file civil claims for damages, especially now that some of the grants are frozen. You'd have standing for reputational harm and financial misrepresentation. Want me to get it started? Janine looked up slowly. Not yet. Rachel blinked. Not. I don't want his panic to end with paperwork. I want him to live in the fallout. Let the phones go silent on him. Let the doors close. She sipped her coffee. Then we'll talk about lawsuits. From the doorway, Callie hovered, a notebook clutched against her chest. She'd heard most of the exchange but waited until the room quieted before stepping in. Grandma, she said carefully, when do I get to sign something? Janine's brows lifted. Sign what? I don't know, something, a paper, a form, a line that matters. Rachel smiled faintly from her chair. She's been asking to shadow grant review meetings. I don't want to watch them, Callie said. her voice firming. I want to do them. Janine studied her granddaughter for a long moment. The way she stood, square-shouldered, like a sapling bracing against wind. Soon, she said at last. Not because of your last name, but because you earned the seat. Callie nodded, jaw set. She didn't smile. Just then, Lloyd's phone buzzed. He frowned and answered, listened, then slowly turned pale. He looked at Janine. That security footage you asked about, from last night. She set the cup down, eyes narrowing. It wasn't just someone watching from the street, Lloyd said slowly. It was someone on your back lawn. Callie looked up sharply. Did they say who? No, he replied. But they didn't run when the lights came on. Janine's voice dropped to a whisper. Then they weren't afraid. She stood. The announcement came midweek, tucked inside the fourth paragraph of a press release that otherwise spoke of restructuring and strategic stewardship for the next generation. But the name stood out like bold print against a gray page. Callie Jean Blackwell, successor trustee, Blackwell Legacy Fund. The title landed with more weight than even Callie had expected. It wasn't ceremonial, it was real. Her email pinged within the hour. Board calendars, digital access credentials, a welcome packet signed personally by Lloyd. By Thursday morning, she was seated beside Janine at the long walnut conference table on the top floor of the trust's headquarters. 12 board members sat in a semicircle, some skeptical, others curious. A few, mostly the older ones, wore expressions that wavered between nostalgia and caution. Janine didn't speak for her. She simply nodded once toward Callie and let the silence fall to her granddaughter. Callie didn't fill it with nervous chatter. She stood, adjusted her notes, not a speech, just observations, and began. I'm not here to replace anyone. I'm here because legacy should outlive personality. And silence isn't neutral, it's just slow surrender. A ripple passed through the room. She spoke of transparency, public trust, community-driven priorities, and most importantly, accountability. Not the fashionable kind. The binding kind. When she finished, one of the older members, a retired judge, leaned forward and said simply, "We'd be fools not to confirm her." The vote was unanimous. Lance heard about it in the worst possible way, over iced coffee and forced small talk with a foundation donor who hadn't yet read the room. So, the man said brightly, Callie stepping into your mother's shoes. Didn't see that coming, huh? Lance's mouth froze mid-sip. What? The man blinked. Oh, I thought, well, yeah. It's already public. They named her trustee of the Legacy Fund. Big move. Lance left before his drink was finished. That afternoon, Callie stood in the courtyard of Jefferson Arts Collective, handing over a ceremonial check for $15,000, her first mini-grant as trustee. The local kids' art program had nearly shut down the year before. Now, under her oversight, they'd get new supplies, upgraded studio space, and a pilot mentorship program with local artists. One of the students, a shy boy with ink-stained fingers, gave her a hand-drawn thank you card, and she held onto it like something sacred. Photos were taken. A quote from her appeared in the Tribune the next day. The arts don't just reflect who we are, they shape who we let ourselves become. Janine stood in the back during the ceremony, arms crossed loosely, watching Callie speak to the press with a poise that didn't need rehearsal. But Mara wasn't far behind. She waited until the crowd thinned, then approached Janine on the sidewalk outside the gallery, voice low and bitter. So this is it, she said. You're choosing her over your own daughter. Janine turned slowly, gaze clear. No. Mara laughed once, sharp and dry. Then what do you call this? Janine looked toward Callie, who was still talking gently with one of the younger artists, her hands moving animatedly. I'm choosing stability, Janine said. Over silence, Mara's mouth tightened. You think I chose silence? You think I haven't spent years biting my tongue while Lance rewrote every version of our history? Janine's tone didn't rise. Then maybe you should have bit back. Mara's face faltered, not from anger, but something colder, wounded pride. You think you're saving this family, but all you're doing is fracturing it in new ways. I'm not saving the family, Janine said quietly. I'm saving the work, the mission, the actual legacy. Mara turned and walked off without another word. As Janine stepped back inside, Callie caught her eye and held it. Was that Aunt Mara? She asked softly. Janine gave a small nod. She's adjusting. Callie looked away, thoughtful. What if she never does? Janine placed a hand on her shoulder. Then we keep building anyway. Across town, Lance sat alone in a dimly lit bar, watching footage from the grant ceremony on his phone. He paused it on Callie's face, mid-sentence, lit up with purpose. Then he zoomed in on the small logo behind her, Callahan Legacy Reimagined. He hadn't approved that name. He hadn't approved any of it. And he wasn't done yet. The conference room was colder than it needed to be, not because of the thermostat, but because of who sat where. Lance, flushed and fidgeting, occupied the seat nearest the whiteboard, tie tight but askew, knuckles white against the armrests. His attorney, a polished man in an overpriced suit whose name Rachel couldn't remember and hadn't bothered to learn, sat beside him with a folder marked Confidential Settlement Discussion. Janine sat directly across, unmoved, silent, a pale blue scarf looped neatly at her throat, her expression unreadable. One hand rested on the table, the other remained in her lap, unmoved since the meeting began. Rachel stood. No podium, no notes, just precision honed over years of legal sparring and a deep, earned contempt for the man across from her client. We agreed to this meeting as a courtesy, Rachel began. Not a concession. Let's be clear on that. Lance's lawyer cleared his throat. We understand, and Mr. Dunbridge would like to begin by clarifying his position. No, Janine said simply. It was the first word she'd spoken since arriving. Lance blinked. Mom, can we not start like this? Rachel arched a brow but didn't interrupt. He exhaled, tried again. I'm not denying things got messy, but this, all of this, is a misunderstanding. I thought I was operating under inherited authority. We've always worked as a family. Rachel cut in, sharp. Mr. Dunbridge, that isn't how inheritance law works, nor fiduciary law, nor basic human decency. Lance's lawyer raised a hand. Let's keep this civil. No, Rachel said again. Let's keep it accurate. She placed a slim folder on the table and slid it toward the center. Inside, a timeline, exhibits, notarized documents, screen captures, and financial correspondence all pointing to one thing: deliberate misrepresentation. Your client, Rachel said coolly, submitted 6 unauthorized grant proposals using Janine Blackwell's name and signature. He claimed advisory control on a fund from which he was explicitly removed. He altered public documents, gave interviews mischaracterizing his role, and redirected correspondence from donors into a private inbox. Lance shifted. It wasn't malicious. Rachel didn't look at him. Intent does not erase damage. She turned her gaze on his attorney. What we're prepared to discuss today is the scope of the settlement offer, which, to be clear, is a privilege, not a right. Janine didn't speak, didn't nod, didn't blink. Lance finally snapped. I built half of what that foundation is today. Janine's eyes lifted. You decorated it. The silence was instant, thick. Lance swallowed, faltering now. You act like I'm some outsider. Janine's voice didn't rise, but it hit like a hammer. You are now. His jaw twitched. She leaned forward just slightly. This is your last seat at any of my tables. You will never again claim my name, my history, or my work as yours. Not in a pitch deck, not in a handshake, not in passing. She straightened her scarf. You don't get to co-sign legacy with deceit. Lance opened his mouth, then closed it. His lawyer spoke up cautiously. We'd like to review the terms of the settlement. Quiet resolution would benefit all parties. Rachel gave him a tight, professional smile. You have 5 days. After that, we proceed to full litigation. Financial, civil, and reputational. With exhibits. She stood, collecting her folder. We'll forward the offer by end of day. Redline anything, and we'll see you in court instead. Janine rose beside her, calm as stone. As they turned to leave, Lance stood abruptly. So that's it? That's the end. Janine paused at the door. No, she said, voice cold and measured. This is the consequence. Then she left. Hours later, in the parking garage beneath the building, Rachel's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then handed it silently to Janine in the passenger seat. An anonymous tip. Text only. If you're protecting Callie, you need to look into the old grants. Something was buried. Lance didn't work alone. Janine's expression darkened. What is it? Callie asked from the back seat. Janine didn't answer. Not yet. She just stared at the screen. Something old had just clawed its way to the surface. By the time Lance walked into his Thursday morning consultation, his legal team was down by 2. They didn't resign in dramatic fashion. No slam doors. No harsh statements. Just quiet messages through assistants and polite clipped emails. At this time, our firm will be unable to represent Mr. Dunbridge in ongoing proceedings. He skimmed through the last one in disbelief, sitting in the lobby of Breckman and Hollis, where he'd once been offered scotch before meetings. Today, the receptionist didn't offer him water. Inside, the junior associate on duty wouldn't even meet his eye. Mr. Hollis sends his regrets. Your matters no longer align with the firm's values. He tried to laugh. I've been aligning your values with 6 figures for the last 5 years. The associate didn't flinch. And yet we're still declining further engagement. By lunch, 2 more of his business partners had pulled out of the waterfront redevelopment project. He saw it on LinkedIn before his assistant could warn him. One had even issued a press statement. We believe in transparent leadership and will no longer be associated with the Dunbridge proposal for Bayline East. No one returned his calls. That same afternoon, Callie took the mic at the Midtown Youth Business Seminar, a late addition to the speaker lineup. The crowd was mostly high school seniors and undergrads, but the room was packed. She didn't wear a suit, just slacks, a charcoal blouse, and the same pair of boots she'd worn to 3 site visits and 1 press event. Her talk was titled, Silent Power in Legal Leverage. Influence, she told them, isn't how loud you are, it's how legally sound your steps are. Paper trails beat platforms. And sometimes, real power is knowing which signature not to give. The room was silent, locked in. No one whispered, no one checked their phones. When she finished, the moderator leaned in with a grin. And what would your younger self say if she could see you now? Callie thought for a moment. She'd say, keep the receipts. The applause started slow, then built into something that felt like approval earned, not gifted. Outside, Janine stood near the exit, arms folded. She didn't say anything, just nodded once as Callie passed. The nod meant more than any ovation. Mara, watching all of it unfold from the edges of respectability, tried something new. She posted a throwback, a photo from a 4th of July picnic 10 years earlier, back when the family still fit inside a single lawn shot. Richard on the grill, Janine in sunglasses, holding baby Callie on her lap, Lance standing behind them, smiling. Mara seated off to the side, holding a lemonade and looking somewhere off camera. She captioned it, Whatever happens, family remains. It got 67 likes in the first hour, then 28 comments. Then the comments disappeared. Closed. Too many had said what she didn't want to read. Tell that to the Grants. Does family include court subpoenas now? Delete this, Mara, seriously. She turned off her phone. In Janine's study, the sunlight was low and golden, catching the edges of a framed photo of Richard on the bookshelf. Rachel leaned over a stack of manila folders. His reach is dying. His name's been dropped from 2 boards and 5 proposals. That's more than shame. That's structural collapse. Janine didn't smile, but her shoulders eased slightly. Rachel tapped a document and added, almost to herself, He played with borrowed names. We signed ours. Janine looked up, gaze steady. That's why it's still standing. Rachel sat back, then hesitated. We should talk about the tip. Janine nodded slowly. Tomorrow. I want tonight to belong to what we've built, not what we'll have to dig up. From the hallway, Callie's voice drifted in. Grandma. In here, Janine called. Callie stepped into the doorway, holding an envelope, thick, official, unmarked. Rachel narrowed her eyes. What is it? Callie handed it over. It came to my desk. No return address. Just this inside. Janine opened it carefully. Inside, a single sheet. Typed, clean, no fingerprints, just 5 words. She knew. Ask the auditor. Janine didn't speak. Rachel was already on her phone. Callie's voice barely rose above a whisper. Who's she? The rotunda of City Hall had never looked more polished. Chandeliers glowed warm above linen-draped tables. The marble floor waxed to a mirror sheen. Strings of soft jazz threaded through the clinking of glasses and murmured conversation, but beneath it all hummed something sharper. Respect, earned and overdue. Janine stood near the back of the room, her hands folded lightly at her waist. Wearing black silk and a thin gold pin in the shape of an oak leaf, Richard's symbol once. Not a crown, just roots. The evening had been marketed as a civic leadership gala, but everyone knew what it really was. A tribute to her. An acknowledgement, too late for Richard, but just in time to mean something. To the city, to the work, to her. She hadn't asked for this spotlight. She'd built to avoid it. But she was here, head high, spine straight. Callie stood just to her left, dress crisp, speech folded once in her hand. Rachel lingered at the bar, trying not to look like she was guarding both of them, and failing spectacularly. At the far end of the room, Mara slipped in without fanfare. No +1, no smile. Just an awkward nod to the event coordinator and a quiet seat near the edge of the crowd. She wore navy and grief like twin layers, both of them pressed and polite. Lance was not invited. Even his name had been scrubbed from the event's digital history. The last-minute board vote to do so passed 11-1. The lone dissent abstained, not defended. Janine didn't look toward the doors. When the mayor finished his long, stilted list of commendations, Mr. Polk stepped up to the microphone, gavel pinned to his lapel like an inside joke. He didn't read from the script. This city has had its share of setbacks, he said plainly. But there are names that anchor us. Mrs. Janine Blackwell is one of those names. A murmur of applause started, then built into something undeniable. She's weathered storms, Polk continued, and more importantly, she's called them out. She didn't let them pass quietly. She planted, she protected, she confronted, and this city is stronger because of it. He reached behind him and held up a framed citation. On behalf of the Civic Ethics Council and the City of Fairmore, we present this official commendation to Mrs. Blackwell for exemplary service in community leadership and integrity under pressure. Janine walked to the stage like it was any other boardroom, not hurried, not bashful. But when she turned to face the crowd, her eyes swept briefly across Mara and then to Callie. I didn't think I'd ever be honored in this building, Janine said into the mic, voice low but clear. Not after what I've seen inside it, but sometimes endurance is impact. Sometimes standing still long enough forces the world to pivot. The room quieted. I didn't inherit legacy, she said. I maintained it, day after day, not because it was owed to me, but because it was in danger. There was no applause yet, just stillness, reverent. She nodded once, then stepped back, and Callie took her place. She looked over her paper once, then folded it again and tucked it into her clutch. She told me once that she was the floor, the thing everyone walked on without realizing it kept the whole building up. Callie's voice was steady, almost defiant. She wasn't extra, she was foundation. Rachel exhaled quietly from the corner, an uncharacteristic tremor in her breath. Callie went on. They handed her charity, and she turned it into policy. They gave her grief, and she turned it into structure. If you ever stood on stable ground in this city, chances are she poured the cement. Now the applause came, loud, long, lasting. Janine didn't look away from her granddaughter. Rachel lifted her glass and tried to blink something away. First time in 20 years I've cried over a speech, she muttered to herself. And it had to be hers. Behind them, Mara sat still, stiff. She clapped 3 times, then stopped. Her phone buzzed. She checked the screen. One message, no sender ID. Just a link. She clicked it. A loading bar, a locked file, then one name, her own. Mara Dunbridge, audit review, confidential. Her breath caught, and across the room, Janine turned, just slightly, like she'd felt the shift in the air. The conference room at the Blackwell Foundation was quiet in the way sacred spaces sometimes are, not hushed, but waiting. The long, polished table reflected morning light, and the floor-to-ceiling windows framed a skyline shaped, in part, by the woman sitting silently in the back row. Janine didn't speak. She just watched, At the head of the table sat a seat that had once belonged to Richard, then briefly to herself, then commandeered, wrongfully, bitterly, by Lance. Now it was Callie's. No fanfare, no plaque, just her name on the agenda and her posture straight as she opened the morning session. First order of business: realignment of the family giving structure. The oldest board member, a retired superintendent with 40 years under his belt, leaned in, intrigued. Callie continued flipping through a printed proposal. We've historically prioritized property development, restoration, and arts. Those will remain. But our long-term impact depends on equipping the people who live in the places we've preserved. So, starting next fiscal cycle, 25% of unrestricted giving will pivot to education equity, grants, mentorship pipelines, and community teaching fellowships, especially in underserved zip codes. A younger woman near the end of the table blinked. That's a big shift, Callie nodded, because legacy isn't just what we save, it's what we seed. Silence stretched, then broke, with a wave of nods, quiet murmurs, even a smile from a man who hadn't smiled since Richard's memorial. The motion passed, unanimously. Janine sat in the back with her hands folded over her purse, a small breath leaving her chest, not relief, not surprise. Pride, the kind that didn't clap or cheer. The kind that held its posture and kept its head level because it expected to see the next generation rise, and still found awe in it anyway. Rachel entered midway through the meeting, leaning against the back wall with a coffee and a look that was both professional and personal. "She's you," she murmured to Janine between agenda items, only without the hesitation. Janine didn't bristle. She nodded. "Good," she said. "Hesitation cost us years." Outside the boardroom, reporters were already waiting in the lobby, eager to pounce on any headline. Youngest trustee reshapes legacy fund. Blackwell bloodline finds new center of gravity. Callie exited through the side elevator instead, choosing dignity over spectacle. Rachel followed, already on the phone with Lloyd, coordinating press filters and publication windows. Janine didn't need to follow. Her part was done. Later that afternoon, across the echo chamber of social media, Lance tried one more time. A post, a photo, a caption. A smiling black and white image of Richard, cropped from a decades-old benefit dinner. Captioned, "He built it, not them. No tags, no comments. Except the ones that came anyway. You misspelled embezzled. Your mom is them." Legacy doesn't need a spokesman, especially not you. Within hours, the post had fewer shares than Callie's speech excerpt from the gala. Even Mara didn't like it. One of the family's old partner orgs unfollowed him publicly. The bitter punchline: he had nothing left to burn, but he still kept striking matches. Janine saw the post, briefly. Then she opened her phone, scrolled to settings, and shut off notifications for good. Silence followed, not empty, but earned. Outside, the sky was turning. Pale pinks edged the clouds. Callie's new office lights were still on. Visible from the street below, Janine sipped tea from a chipped ceramic cup, older than any app on her phone. No screens, no sounds, just the hush of a world shifting back into balance. Until a knock came at the door. One knock, then two. Rachel's voice from the hall. "You need to see this." Janine opened the door. Rachel held a manila envelope, unmarked. No return address. Again. Janine took it. Inside, a photo, a young Mara, sitting beside Richard at a conference table. Her signature, clean and clear, on a grant proposal that predated the foundation's restructuring. Stamped, archived, internal only, never filed. Underneath, a sticky note in tight, unfamiliar handwriting. It didn't start with Lance. Janine didn't blink. But the air around her shifted, like something long buried had just exhaled. The rain came soft that morning, a quiet, apologetic drizzle that left streaks on the kitchen window but didn't bother to thunder. Janine stood at the counter, hands wrapped around a mug of Earl Grey, her scarf loose around her shoulders. No music, no news. Just the clink of her spoon and the hush of a world trying to return to stillness. Then, the doorbell. Not urgent, just present. She opened it to find Mara standing on the porch, coat damp, umbrella forgotten somewhere behind her. hair frizzed, makeup gone. Her hands clutched a folded envelope, but her expression held something more fragile. I should have stopped him, Mara said, before Janine could speak. I knew what he was doing. Not all of it, not the fake filings or the redirected checks, but enough. Janine didn't move. She didn't reach for the envelope. Mara went on, voice catching. I didn't stop him, and I didn't stop myself either. Janine stepped aside just enough for her to enter. No welcome, just room. Mara walked in slowly, eyes moving over the familiar furniture like it was evidence. She sat at the edge of the kitchen table, the envelope still clutched in both hands like a relic. I kept thinking I was keeping peace, she said, keeping the family from imploding. You weren't, Janine said evenly. You were keeping the lie from inconveniencing you. Mara winced. That's fair. Janine placed her mug down and leaned against the counter, arms folded. You didn't have to fight me, she said. You just had to see me. Mara looked up, startled by the sharpness and the sorrow underneath it. I did see you. No, Janine said, soft but certain. You saw what he told you I was. What made it easier to let him lead. Silence stretched. I signed something I didn't read, Mara said quietly. Back when Richard was still in and out of hospitals. Lance told me it was routine. Janine's mouth didn't move, but her eyes flared just once. That signature, the one in the photo, it was mine, but not the choice. I believe you, Janine said. That stunned Mara more than any accusation could have. I came to try to fix it, she said, finally sliding the envelope forward. To see if there's any way back into this. Janine didn't open it, just placed one hand gently on top of it. Everything's signed, she said. Filed, sealed. The trust is restructured. The seats are filled. The doors you walked past are closed now, on purpose. Mara's eyes filled, but she didn't let them fall. Janine turned toward the stove. But I made tea. It wasn't a welcome, not really. It was a temporary shelter. Mara nodded and moved toward the counter, slow and cautious, as if trying not to spook a bird. When the tea was poured, they sat across from one another. No sugar, no reminiscing. Just two women in the ruins of the same story, learning how to breathe in proximity. Callie came in from the side door, bag slung over her shoulder, hair still damp from the rain. She paused when she saw her mother. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. Hey, she said. Hi, baby, Mara replied, voice tentative. Callie didn't respond immediately. Then she walked forward and gave her a brief, careful hug. The kind reserved for relatives who've missed too many seasons. Mara held on for an extra second. Callie pulled away. I've got that youth mentorship site visit, she said to Janine. Janine nodded. I'll be here. Callie turned to go, then paused. She looked at her mother once more. You're doing the right thing, she said. Just late. The screen door clicked shut behind her. Mara looked down into her tea. She hates me. No, Janine said. She's building where you paused. Mara looked up, eyes shining. Can I come back? Not into the trust. Just in. Janine's fingers tapped the side of her mug. We can share air, she said, voice almost kind. Not tables. Mara blinked, then nodded. And from Janine's phone, still face down on the counter, a new message buzzed. Subject line? Auditor files. Final release. Janine didn't reach for it. Not yet. The pen didn't shake in Janine's hand. It hovered for a beat, then glided across the deed's signature line with the confidence of a woman who knew exactly what she was handing over, and to whom. Callie sat across the oak desk, not quite breathing. She didn't interrupt. She didn't ask again. She just waited. When Janine finished, she turned the document around with deliberate calm. It's yours now, she said. Callie blinked once. All of it? Every inch. The Dunbridge estate, once sprawling, once ornamental, was now officially in the hands of the youngest Blackwell to ever hold title. But it wasn't a manor anymore, not a museum either. It was headquarters. The Blackwell Foundation for Civic Legacy and Literacy had taken root in the very place Lance had once envisioned luxury condos and a cultural wellness spa. Now the tennis courts had been repaved into reading gardens. The West Wing had become office space. The old ballroom? A community library and grant classroom. The stained glass panels in the study cast watercolor patterns on grant review tables. Outside, a new sign stood under the oaks, built to last, open to all. Rachel stood in the doorway, arms crossed, a thin smirk on her face. "Well," she said, flipping through the paperwork. "It's poetic and efficient, my two favorite things." Janine looked toward the wide windows, sunlight streaking across old mahogany. He tried to build a monument to himself, all glass and ego. Rachel nodded. "Instead, you built a tool." Callie traced a finger across the embossed seal on the bottom of the deed, then looked up. "We don't build to flex," she said. "We build to last." Janine smiled then, not a soft one, but proud. "You get that from your grandfather. He thought permanence was measured in utility, not prestige." Rachel pulled out her phone and snapped a quick photo of the signed deed. "The moment Legacy got its land back," she said, and slipped the phone away. Callie looked down at the paper again, then said, "He'll see this." "He already has," Janine said. She nodded toward the inbox on her desk, where a printed screenshot sat. Lance's latest social post. "They're weaponizing nostalgia, but don't worry, I've got plans." Only the plans didn't matter now. The land was no longer his. The board wasn't his. The face of the legacy wasn't his. He had an audience of one, himself. Later that day, a small private dedication was held in the library wing. No press, no ribbon cutting. Just foundation staff, a few community partners, and the sound of kids flipping through new books in the room next door. Janine stood at the back again, just as she had in the boardroom. Her role, now, was presence, not leadership. The final speaker was Callie. She stepped forward and faced the room with practiced ease. "When my uncle pitched this property for redevelopment," she said, "he called it a blank slate. Said it had excess acreage with no economic memory." She paused. "Turns out," she continued, "it had memory, deep roots, and that extra chair they thought was ornamental, it was holding up the whole table." Janine's throat caught just once. Callie looked toward her and said nothing more. Applause came, soft, respectful, earned. After the crowd filtered out, Callie stayed behind, standing in the archway of the new literacy wing, watching volunteers shelve books. Janine approached slowly, hands clasped behind her back. "She's becoming what I hoped she'd be," Janine said to Rachel, who had rejoined her near the door. Rachel didn't respond immediately. She was watching something, or someone, outside the tall windows. Janine followed her gaze. A car, parked across the street. Engine off. A man inside. Not Lance. Older, thinner, in a charcoal coat and glasses. Rachel's expression hardened. "That's the auditor," she said. Janine didn't flinch. "The one from the files?" Rachel nodded slowly. "And he doesn't look like someone just passing by." From across the glass, the man raised a hand. Not a wave, a gesture of recognition. He held up a folder, then pointed to the building. Janine's voice lowered. "He's not here for Lance." Callie turned, noticing the exchange. "What's going on?" Rachel exhaled. "We're about to find out who else thought the property was theirs." The email sat unread in Janine's inbox for hours. Subject: Feature Request, Blackwell Legacy Spotlight. From Fairmore Daily Chronicle, Senior Profiles Editor. She'd already skimmed the opening lines. "We'd love to sit down with you and discuss your journey, your leadership, and what it means to step back now, as your granddaughter steps forward." She didn't click reply. Instead, she turned off her screen and walked the long way down the corridor of what had once been her husband's estate, now her granddaughter's foundation. The halls were alive. Children's laughter echoed from the youth theater room. Two interns debated print margins outside the literacy wing. Someone played a cello softly in the renovated sunroom, where Lance once proposed installing a cigar bar. Janine moved through it all without announcement. She needed no introduction here. She paused near the courtyard, watching as a volunteer read aloud to a group of third graders, sprawled across old rugs and new beanbags. The reader's voice rose and fell in rhythm, and the children followed it like a tide. From there, she drifted toward the dining room, or what used to be, where crystal chandeliers once hung above long, silent meals, filled with performance and politeness. Now stood a reclaimed wood table flanked by mismatched chairs, each one painted, preserved, and named. She walked slowly along the line. reading the engraved brass plaques. Alyssa James spent 14 years fundraising for others, never received her own. Carla Stenson proposed the city's first black female art grant, denied, then copied. Nina Rivera wrote 312 checks, never got a seat. Every chair was a story, a legacy, a recovery. Near the head of the table she stopped. The plaque there read, Janine Blackwell, not extra, essential. Her breath hitched. She reached out and rested a hand on the wood. It was warm from sunlight, smooth from use. Someone had oiled it well. She could see fingerprints on the finish, not hers. Callie stepped into the room quietly, a tablet tucked under one arm. She didn't speak right away. Janine didn't turn. I got a press request today, Janine said. Front page interview, legacy issue. They want to sit down. Callie stepped closer. Are you going to do it? Janine shook her head. Let the building speak. Silence. Then, you made room for everyone else, Callie said. I made room for you. That landed. Janine turned to her now, not surprised, just moved. That's grace, Janine said. And legacy. They stood together in the sunlit space, between chairs that once held silence and now held story. A grandmother and a granddaughter, one having built the ground, the other laying down the bricks above it. Janine's eyes swept the room once more. This is the only table I ever wanted to leave, Callie smiled. And the only one we needed you to build first. Behind them, Rachel's voice echoed from the hallway. I hope you two aren't crying again. The new donor tour starts in 10. They turned. Rachel leaned against the doorframe, smirking. You've got a mural to unveil and a legacy wall that's missing one last quote. Yours, Callie teased. Rachel laughed once. God, no, I hate walls. Just wanted to see you two make a run for it. As they exited the room, Janine paused at the threshold. One last look back. Then she said it, low, dry, steady. My daughter's husband once called me the extra chair at every table. She turned to Callie. The smallest smirk tugged at her mouth. He didn't look so confident sitting across from my lawyer.